Quietly you sat in your living room. Your fireplace was lit and giving you a comfy ambience as you read through the exciting plot of a light novel. Recently, you had moved here, away from your family. You missed your two sisters dearly, but you knew that the time had come for you to leave home. A nice toad had offered you the job as a gardener for his decadent estate. Because of this, you moved to the outskirts of a quiet mountain village called Sunhaven that was only a stone toss away from the estate. In fact, you were so far in the village's outskirts you had only one neighbor, who up until tonight had been absent. You had wondered who he or she was, if they were nice, and what they were doing. Admittedly, you were romantic, hoping that whoever it was a knight in shining armor. Just when you were buried in your thoughts, the doorbell to your little brick cottage rang. And you just barely managed to suppress a shriek. You were a scaredy cat. Quickly you put the book back on your coffee table. The bell rang again. 1,000 apologies quickly left your mouth as you sprinted to your door. Not looking for the peephole, you immediately opened it. And needed to suppress another frightful scream. Before you stood a large, muscular wolf man. His normal hair was blonde, yet his wolf ears were covered in black fur. The man's hands ended in vicious claws. His eyes were crimson red, and through his forced smile you could see sharp fangs. "Hello," he said. You could see by his goosebumps that the situation had quickly become just as uncomfortable for him as it was for you. His lips twitched, and he scratched the back of his head. "Name's Bakugou Katsuki. I'm your neighbor. And apparently it's good neighborly behavior to introduce yourself, especially in such a small community." This definitely was not a knight in shining armor. Shakily, you told him your name. Bakugou sighed. "Alright, awkward part's over." Was it though? You thought. "I'm the local hunter. I supply the village's butcher and the toad's estate. That's why I live so far out here. Closer to the woods and all." He shrugged. "But yeah, that's it really." Bakugou turned around, giving you a perfect view of his back. You gulped as your eyes unintentionally flicked towards his butt. His tail was very fluffy, and just as black as the hair on his ears. But also, he had wonderful hips. You blinked and slapped yourself. What were you thinking? "Good night," you shouted. And he stopped moving for a second before continuing on his way. Blushing heavily, you closed the door. The sun hasn't even left the evening sky yet. Three days later, you were walking through the big toad's garden. A new delivery of fertilizer had arrived, and you were carrying the bags from the delivery cart to the manure shed. Every bag was so unbelievably heavy that the only way you could describe this task was shit. Your legs twitched. Your legs twitched in exhaustion. But worst of all, after this one, there were still two left. Suddenly, a heavy pain erupted from your foot as you twisted your ankle. You squeaked in surprise and agony as you fell forward. But the ground never hit you. After a second of panic, you opened your eyes. Strange. There was an arm wrapped around your hips. Slowly you looked up and stared into the grinning face of your neighbor. "Hey." Your mouth hung agape. "Was delivering some venison and saw you struggling." You mouthed a quiet thank you and then said, "Oh, you're so fast." He shrugged. "Wait, where's the poop?" You blinked. "Yeah, the poop." He shrugged and pointed with his head towards his shoulder, where he was carrying the bag. Once again you sighed. "Thank you. Oh, thank you." He chuckled. "What?" "This could have ended so embarrassingly." "Well, allow me to help," he said with almost too much excitement in his voice. I mean, sure. If you don't have anything better to do." He sat you back down on the ground. "I don't," was all he said about that. You showed him where the poop shed was, and then stayed close to him when you returned to the delivery cart. You took the smaller of the two bags, while he took the other. Silently, you walked back to the shed. Even though your package was smaller, it was still heavy enough to make you grunt. Bakugou thankfully kept quiet until the final poop sack had been placed down in the shed. That's some really shitty work, eh?" Bakugou said mockingly. Yeah, you're taking the words out of my mouth." You stuttered, too exhausted to properly think of what to say. "You should come over, so I can thank you." It took both of you a minute to realize what you just said. Blushing, you looked away. "You know, for a drink, I mean." He shrugged, amused by your awkwardness. "Sure thing, little piggy. I'll come later tonight." The smirk on his face was giving you mixed feelings. He waved a quick goodbye. And for the rest of the workday, you were a flustered mess. Hours later, you were quietly sobbing at your dinner table. You couldn't believe that he actually accepted your invitation. You were scared. You had never invited anyone to your home, not even when you still lived with your parents. But you knew the moment you said it, you couldn't go back. Your heart was pounding with anxiety. At least your job had given you enough money by now that you could afford a single bottle of wine. So you weren't fully unprepared. You slowly reached for the bottle, thinking he'd probably stand you up. But just when your fingertips touched the cool glass, you heard a knocking from your door. Immediately you retreated your hand like a child that had been caught stealing from a cookie jar. You cursed, and quickly scuttled to the door, opening it. There stood Bakugou, still in his work clothes. An admittedly very fashionable dark green jacket, under it a beige shirt and baggy camo pants. "Hey," you stuttered as you allowed him inside. He quietly followed you into your kitchen and sat down after you offered a chair to him. Shakily, you poured him a glass of wine. Then gently he took the glass, smelled the red liquid, while you sat down and exhaled. The first minute was over. Only a few more to go. You poured yourself a glass, sighing. This wasn't so bad, was it? "Cheers," he said and took a sip. You followed his movements and forced a smile. "So, he looked at you with these fiery eyes. In this moment, your fight or flight instinct kicked in, and you wanted nothing more than to run away like a little prey animal. "Is this the moment where we do, small talk?" Bakugou laughed and set his elbow on the table. Rubbing his chin with a finger, he said, "Yeah, I guess. He was playing with you, wasn't he? I guess I'll start then, since you're new here. You gulped. I've been living in Sunhaven for 3 years, after being a homeless poacher for another 2 years. He sighed and grinned. Gotta admit, my family raised me to be proud, high and mighty. I was a ball of constant pride and anger. Being homeless really humbled me. Well, just enough to be what you see before you now. Your shoulders twitched. Do you have any friends? He leaned forward. Good question. You blushed. I mean it. He chuckled. You seem to have issues talking to others. But anyways. He leaned back to sit more comfortable and took another sip. I have a few. One is a fellow huntsman, a human by the name of Kirishima. He lives deeper in the forest. I see him occasionally. We're on friendly terms. He inhaled and then exhaled slowly. Then there's my rival, Deku. He's a prince. Bakugou said the last word with disgust. But I guess I only see him as a rival because he doesn't act like a prince. Get what I mean? He should be snobby, but he acts all humble. It feels fake to me. Guess that's why I hate him. You looked at your by now empty glass, then took the bottle of wine and refilled it. Oh, and then there's Ochako. She lives in the center of Sunhaven. Little human girl. When she turned 15 3 years ago, she received this beautiful red hood as a present from her grandmother. She never leaves the house without it. Bakugou smiled softly. But I would never leave my house without it as well if I had it. It's a really expensive material. His eyes met yours as he downed the third glass. So, is the alcohol starting to loosen you up? You whimpered. Now, tell me something about yourself, little piggy. The wine really, by now, had given you a light red tint around your face. The wine, by now, had given you a light red tint around your face. You were quiet for a minute, but then explained. Well, I was raised in a big town with my parents and 2 sisters. You went on explaining him your past over the next hours. Before you even realized it, you had ranted on for over an hour. The wine had been long gone and been replaced by a liquor Bakugou had quickly delivered from his house. And eventually the conversation died down to the both of you drunkenly staring at each other. The grandfather clock in your living room hit midnight, bringing you both out of your daydreaming. I should go, he said and got up from his chair. Wanting to be a good host, you followed him to your door. When you leaned forward to open it, however, you fell, and just like earlier, Bakugou managed to grab you. But this time, he turned you in his arms. If someone were to intrude on the both of you, it may would have seemed like the result of a passionate dance. Your heart raced, out of embarrassment, and being completely and utterly flustered at this point. Not just that, you were completely at his mercy. But you could see from his eyes that he seemed to have trouble himself. While you had been too busy with your own anxieties, he himself had become a mental wreck. Bakugou wanted you from the moment he laid eyes upon you. You are so small and soft His instincts told him to devour you, leaving nothing but bones behind. But over these past 3 days, it developed into something more than hunger. A sexual rage. He wanted to make you his, and the alcohol now made him see nothing but red. The slither of humanity that remained in his brain just barely managed to make him gulp down the cascade of salvia that was now collecting in his jaws. You whimpered. Your legs twitched, feeling hot all over. Your lower body throbbed with excitement as he guided you closer to him. If we do this, he huffed, there's no going back. His hot breath cradled your face like a warm blanket. Pushed onto the edge by the alcohol, you grabbed onto his broad shoulders and lunged your faces together. Your tongue slid across his sharp teeth before stroking over his. Aggressively increased the pressure against your own, deepening the kiss to an almost painful degree. Your eyes rolled back from the pleasure as you almost passed out from the hormonal overload. He pressed you closer to him as he stood up, only separating for a split second to point him towards your upstairs bedroom. Your cottage wasn't that big, just 3 rooms, and under the roof stood your bed. Quickly he carried you up the stairs, huffing and moaning as he approached your bed. And throwing you on top of it. Your face was covered in his spittle. Both of you heaving, he raised his left hand. You have 10 seconds before I rip every last bit of clothing off of you. You grabbed your shirt and began to desperately pull it off, dropping the piece of fabric just before he jumped on top of you. Your bed creaked under his weight. And you felt his claws rip through your pants and underwear, discarding them to the side of your bed. With ease, he opened his belt. And leaned back, allowing you to pull his pants down.